Welcome to Neurodivergent Pulse, where we explore the often misunderstood world of neurodivergence with experts, parents, teachers, and therapists. Grounded in lived experience, each bite-sized episode gives you something practical to try. I am your host, Laetitia Andrak, AI expert, neurodivergent mom and founder of Understanding Zoe. This podcast is recorded on Daryl country. I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hello, Mariam. Welcome to the Neurodivergent Pulse podcast.
Hi, Laetitia. Thank you for having me.
It is going to be a very insightful conversation for everyone who is not familiar with the Gestalt language. But before we start that, I would love to give you the opportunity, Mariam, to introduce yourself and also tell us a bit more about how you started doing this work that I can see in your content on social media.
Yes, thank you. So this all started from my inspiration, which is my son, Joe, who is my middle child. So my background is I'm a family doctor, and my husband and my 3 children, we live in Southern California. My oldest is nearly 11, and then she's neurotypical. And then I have my middle child, who's Joe, he's autistic. And then my youngest is just turned 7, he's neurotypical. So yeah, he's the inspiration behind all this. When we discovered, we learn about autism in medical school, but it's just not at all the same. We had like one lecture on autism, lots of red flags, very negative based, deficit based, those kind of things. So, but we did notice, especially comparing to my oldest, which we shouldn't compare, but we did. He was quieter, preferred to play alone, and kind of doing repetitively the same thing, some stemming, very sensory, also loved to stare at lights, very sensitive to sounds. So we went for his checkup at like 18 months. So you have like the 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and then at the 18 months checkup, that's when you kind of around the time when you start to notice, as they're supposed to go through the milestones, some regression. And so my pediatrician was amazing. We were very lucky with her, and she recommended a developmental assessment. And we, of course, agreed with that. And we had some people come over to our homes. That was a little bit intimidating. It was like 3 hours at our home, 2 strangers, ladies who he didn't know, my son. And they were kind of doing like rigorous testing on him. And then at the end, they gave us a checklist of everything that he couldn't do, not really talking about his strengths, which we saw a lot of strengths in him. And that's it really. But at that time, and they said, he has a high risk of being autistic. And that was when he was like nearly turning 2. And so we started ABA, we started speech therapy. And yeah, we didn't know much about anything about Gestalt Language Processing, nothing about neurodiversity movement, neurodivergent brain, nothing. We did the ABA 3 times a week, which wasn't too much, and speech therapy once a week. And then by the time he turned 3, we got the official diagnosis, and then we had to switch our insurance companies because he turned 3, and that's how it was here. Anyway, so lots of compliance. Now looking back at it these last few years, lots of compliance-based interventions during the therapy, especially ABA. And in speech, our speech therapist through our insurance did not know about Gestalt language. And it was during COVID I learned about Gestalt Language Processing. And that turned things around for us. And when I learned about neurodiversity and all those kind of things, and he was home more, of course, the kids were home. And so we did a lot of things hands-on with him, lots of online resources, read about books, learned about natural language acquisition, discovered Marge Blanc's book, and just read about Gestalt language processing, knowledge of, and we just did not go with our speech therapist. Actually discharged us. She said, I can't help him anymore, go to the school. But the school wasn't enough. And so that's when we started looking for a private speech therapist. And that's what we've been doing since then. So yeah, we've come a long way with that. And that's what kind of made me advocate for just Gestalt language processing and neurodiversity and finding strengths in our children. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Mariam, for sharing this story. And I know that many parents, many advocates, many allies will resonate with that approach where you may start with the approach that is given to you, which may be deficit-based, medical-based, which is the norm, right? And then through your own journey, you moved into the neurodiversity affirming paradigm and really looking through the strengths and in that way becoming such a strong voice in the space. So thank you for sharing, your own journey without hiding any parts, because those are parts of your journey. So thank you so much. So for anyone who is listening to this and they're not familiar with Gestalt language processing, can you explain a bit more what it is before we dive even deeper into that special interest topic of ours?
Yes, so there are actually two ways to learn language. The most common way is analytic language processing, which is most of us learn. And then there's Gestalt language processing. So analytic language processing, usually you have a baby, for example, they pick up one word and then they add on to the words to make a chunk or a sentence.
Yeah.
And that's how they learn language. So, and with Gestalt language processing, which is the other normal but less common way to learn language, and it's more common in autistic, they say maybe 85-90% of autistic individuals learn language this way. This, with Gestalt language processing, you're actually learning a chunk, a phrase. It could be like 2-3 words, or it could be like a whole script, which sometimes is so amazing for me, like a whole script that they just pick up and then they play it all back again. So yeah, it's kind of like the longer way to eventually get to flexible, like grammar, self-generated language. But sometimes in some children, they do go through the stages quickly, and it's divided into stages. So Gestalt language processors, as we call them, they go through different stages of the NLA, which is Natural Language Acquisition Framework. And yeah, I think, with Joe, definitely Gestalt language processor. And now I'm looking back, I don't know, like my daughter is neurotypical, but she did have speech delay. And we're very close to starting speech therapy for her, way before I knew about Gestalt language. And she was about 3.5. And she was just babbling. I remember when we were all done with potty training as well and everything. And then suddenly she started conversing. So I'm not sure with her. And apparently there's a spectrum, they say too, between ALP and GLP. That's still in research. That there is like some individuals are more GLP and then some a little bit ALP. So it's not like 100%, Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for explaining to everyone. And I know that it's something that is really close to home, the way that Zoe learned how to read. She was really struggling in Australia, the way they learn how to read. I don't know if it's the same thing in the US, but it's not like this that I learned how to read in France. It's what they call learning some golden word.
Okay.
So you have to learn some word and then put those words into a sentence and then whereas for Zoe it was easier to learn a whole sentence with that word in the sentence rather than repeating the, that, and so on. So definitely through affirming speech therapy, she developed that confidence around it's okay to learn a whole sentence. And so we're going to go through echolalia in a second. But before we do that, I would love to understand not so much understand, but share with everyone who is on this podcast who is not really familiar with an affirming approach of Gestalt language. Would you like to explain to us what an affirming approach of GLP looks different to a non-affirming approach, a traditional speech therapy approach?
Yeah, before I answer your question, just quickly, it's important that the therapist is knowledgeable in Gestalt language processing and knows about stages. That's very important. And then obviously have them come, and when they're like saying that they're not neuroaffirming, then okay, are they really? So that's when you observe and see how they're doing with the child. Making sure you're there too, like allowing you to be there. That's like the first thing, But honestly, the most important thing is the connection. Is there a connection, and how are they starting to work on that connection? Because if there's no connection, nothing else can happen. That's very important. And then there's a few things, following the child's interests. Sensory regulation is very important. For example, my son, Joe loves being outside, so that's his interest. But I know that it keeps him regulated, like lots of our kids. So we do our sessions outside, and that's okay. Before we used to have ABA, he used to have to earn to go outside.
Oh my gosh.
So he would sit down on the table. It was like on the sofa in our house, and he would have to like point to different things, show me the car, show me this, blah blah. Okay, now you can go outside, kind of thing. So just as an example, so it has to be well regulated, and it's different for every child. They have that sensory profile, which your OT can help you work through. And so with Joe, for example, he loves pressure on his feet. And so we have our speech therapist always providing that pressure. Movement, of course. Lots of our kids love movement during therapy. So we have our peanut ball, the other round physio ball outside. We have the hammock, just lots of movement. We have music on the background. And just, it's okay to move from one thing to another based on what is interesting to him. Other things, also having an AAC device. So again, that comes and goes. So he is provided with an AAC device as an alternative communication for him. And it comes and goes with him. Sometimes he's interested to use it, sometimes he's not, and that's okay. We just have that with him. The speech therapist has one and he has one. And then other things like, of course, like basic things like not forcing eye contact. Yeah. Just have some eye contact when he's comfortable with people. Otherwise, not so much. And like not thinking on the table. We used to do lots of that in ABA. So not required to sit on the table when you're doing therapy. No hand over hand, and things like that. No, we don't even do like the rewards, the things. They don't even work for him anyway. So we don't do any of that. And just try to make it natural, because that's at the end of that's how he learns language as well. It's whatever is natural for him and makes sense. So yeah, we have a very good speech therapist right now, and so we make sure always doing that, and I'm involved and see what she's doing so I can learn. Yeah,
I love what you said here, Mariam, because all of those elements that you mentioned can be green flag and red flag. And I know for us, we've tried many different speech therapy before finding one with green flag. And now when she comes at home, it's like wherever Zoe wants to sit and however Zoe wants to have a session. And it's so beautiful then to see that bond that they're creating and that trust and how much she cares. And she uses Understanding Zoe a lot, our speechy, to write in Understanding Zoe what's been happening and share it with the rest of the village and so on. And she's truly deeply caring. So if you listen to this, Michaela, big shout out to you. She is absolutely an absolute legend. And I wish every parent, every children who wants to go with a speechy could find their own Michaela or this own speechy. Like it sounds you found a great one as well. Was really affirming and connecting with a child's interest and here to help them, find their own way to communicate whichever way is the best for them. I love that.
Yes. And we found ours through Meaningful Speech, I believe it was. Actually, the first one we had was Meaningful Speech, and then she had to move out of state, so she recommended this one. It was a friend. But yeah, Meaningful Speech Registry was how, and it keeps increasing, like more and more speech therapists out there. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I had another question for you, which is something around the myth and misconception of Gestalt Language Processor and Gestalt Language Processing. So would you mind sharing some myth and some misconception about this profile?
Yes. So we had belief in this too, actually, at the beginning. For example, when I was younger and before we knew about Gestalt Language Processing, we would ask him a question and he would just repeat the question back.
Yes.
And thinking, why is he doing that? Like, it's just, echoing it back to us. The echoing is very important. So we avoid questions right now. He is starting to kind of answer the where and what questions now, going kind of into stage 3, but we're still avoiding questions and we do more declarative language. But yeah, at the beginning, we used to ask so many questions, and we'll do that earlier too. A lot of the time you think, why is he doing that? Why is he echoing? Why is he saying some script from some cartoon he watched like yesterday, And a lot of the time we cannot ignore that, It's something going on there. I would say probably with Joe, maybe like 80% at least is communication. And the rest is probably just like regulation. But it could be both too, kind of depending, how his state is. Communication, regulation, maybe he's communicating something, he's going into a meltdown, But like such a big chunk of it is communication. It's important, and we have to kind of be the detective and figure out what that is, because it's not literal a lot of the time. And then we kind of try to model. But again, sometimes the modeling, he doesn't get that, and then we have to figure out why. Sometimes dyspraxia plays a role, and I know he has some degree of that as well. Like he's thinking it, but it's difficult for him to say it. Like alternative AAC is important, or sign language, or some visual or something. Until we can help them, more. So, but echolalia is the big one, I think, and that was many years ago. They used to, I think, connect that with schizophrenia and things like that, right? When they like are seeing things or hearing things, and
Yeah, I know what you mean, and that's where there is a high risk of them masking.
Oh yeah.
If you go down the route of ABBA therapy, and we're a podcast all about neurodiversity affirming here, so I am allowed to say that, and this is what I claim. So if you go down that path, you will encourage masking, and actually echolalia and scripting and are really helpful for children who have Gestalt language processing, or for adult as well. It's really important. So you mentioned a few times the different stages. Would you mind, for any listener who now is curious, being like, oh, what is stage 1? What is stage 2? What is stage 3? Would you mind sharing a bit more about that with them?
Yeah, I'll keep it very simple.
Yes.
Especially the earlier stages, it's really easy to recognize. So stage 1 is the echolalia we've been talking about, the squeaking, the whole chunk that they first learn. And then stage 2, and going from one stage to another, we don't know how long that will take. Each child is very different. Speech therapy, and the earlier you start it, will help. So stage 2 is when they start to break it down. And initially, Joe was stage 1, of course. And then when we had the speech therapist, he started getting to stage 2, like maybe a year after. And it was so exciting. Like, it's what we call mitigation. So, for example, he has a phrase, which is stage 1, that says, let's play. And then let's eat, will become, for example, so eat would go now instead of play. That'll be stage 2. So they're kind of breaking it down and they're switching. So they'll take a little bit of this one and put in the other sentence, the other phrase. So mitigation, stage 2, is breaking it down. And then stage 3 is breaking it down further to single words.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like going to how babies, ALPs, analytical language processing, may talk, which is like single word and then add on. Stage 2 is mitigation, breaking it down, kind of like more flexible language, makes kind of maybe less literal, like you can hear like the communication more. And stage 3 is single words, which is weird, because now it's like you think, okay, they've gone backwards, right? Like it's a single word. It can also be like, they say like noun and adjective, like blue sky or something like that.
Yeah.
Noun plus noun and adjective. And then it starts to get a little bit more complicated. So from stage 4 to 6, so 4, 5, 6, it's grammar is starting to come in. And that's when you can also see them maybe asking questions, and maybe you can also ask them questions. So the W questions, you can start doing that in speech therapy from stage 4 to 6. So they start to kind of say the wrong type of grammar in those stages. And that's definitely, you need to have a speech therapist there who is well, versed and knows about all that kind of grammar, because it's not very straightforward. There's like a whole chart. Marge Blanc, with her book, which is like a big textbook, she has like all these charts at the back that you can reference to. So yeah, it's very interesting. But right now, Joe is stage 2 to 3. I see some 3s when he's saying like one single words, or noun plus noun, or it's very interesting, or 2 nouns. And I always get so excited when I hear the stage 3s, or some new stage 2. And just because they're stage 3 or 2 doesn't mean that they still don't have the gestalts.
Yeah.
It's just that they may break them down quicker now as they go through the stages, and if they're having, say, they're not well regulated or something like that, they may also go back to stage 1 more and start scripting, and to help with regulation as well. So yeah,
of course, it's dynamic, and that's something that many people don't understand, the dynamism of neurodivergence and autism and Gestalt and ADHD and so on. So I love what you shared here. Something that is a question that I didn't share previously with you, so feel free to tell me if you're not comfortable answering this one, which is how then school can support, or the other way around, create difficulties for children with Gestalt language processing. Because, I know that's why we moved Zoe from one school to another.
Yes.
She was in a public school, and then she moved into a Montessori school where it's more like the way of learning is not, it's appropriate for Gestalt language processor. So she didn't have to learn those words and then move from the golden word to the blue word, to the, those simple words that she needed to learn, and which wouldn't work for her. So what has been your experience, or what have you seen in the experience of other parents with Gestalt language processor children going into school, and what can support those children to help the teacher who may be listening to this podcast, and what can be adding more difficulties to those children, just to help the teachers listening to this, or for the parents listening wanting to share this with their teacher?
Yes. Okay. So we actually, from the beginning, Joe was in this school from the age of like 3 in the preschool, and then it continued, and now he's 8 years old, and he is in grade 3. So we've been having basically the same group of therapists, although one left, but kind of the same environment, he knows. So when I learned about Gestalt language processing, I actually communicated to the speech therapist. And at that time, she was very open. We were very lucky with the school district. She was very open to learning about Gestalt language. And so what I did, she hadn't heard of it, but she was very keen to learn. And so I emailed her, and I gave her some booklets for my speech therapist, actually. I gave it to her, and she read about it. And there's a natural language acquisition course, an LA course, that I told her about as well. And I think she said at the time that the school was going to pay for that course for her to take, for her and for her other co-worker, speech therapist. So that was the first thing. And she's still learning. She actually left, but there's another one now that's also still learning. They are comfortable, I feel like, with stage 3, but beyond, it gets kind of more like you have to learn more. And Joe's hasn't got that stage yet, but still. Then during the IEP meeting, so we have it's very important to create goals for Gestalt, specific for Gestalt language processors, the speech therapy goals. So I have to make sure that, I look at the report a few days before the meeting and make sure that they're not doing the ALP approach, like the same with Zoe, like adding on the words, So we make sure right now we have all the phrases, they're modeling those, they're using the device, making sure he's regulated during his session. So we're very lucky we have a good school district, and I haven't had any problems with that. And I also had like an advocate who knew about Gestalt language come in. She was on the Zoom during the meeting. Yeah. So just to make sure everything is in line. But I can see maybe, some school districts would be frustrating to kind of, some may not be willing to learn, right? Some teachers, like, this is what we do, this is what we're going to go through, this is our standard, how we teach our kids. And then there's frustration, they don't get far ahead with their speech goals. But yeah, I have to really stay on top of that. That's the most important thing during the IEP meeting for me, the speech therapy goals. And they've been good with that. And sometimes they say the AAC device is a distraction for him. So that's a little bit, you have to kind of see what's going on there, because you have to be careful with that. So we've tried to find ways around it, and they've really tried to like maybe create like something like a visual, like like another AAC in front of him, but not the actual AAC. We try to get around it so that he can still learn, but not take it away, like have a visual, not take away language, things like that. They become very, very good with communication. That's important. And I try to find, like, make sure who is a speech therapist, who is his OT at the beginning of the year. And then usually the teacher coordinates that. And he's in the same class, so he's familiar with same kind of students, but the same classroom. But we'll see how things go. And the next IEP meeting is at the beginning of the next year. So far, I gave the material and things. So that's important, And I even designed like a pamphlet that I eventually plan to give about Gestalt language to the school to distribute if they can, whoever they want, the parents or whoever.
I love that. You're doing it sounds like you're doing a lot of advocacy and education and sharing that with the school, which is, something that we end up doing a lot as parents of neurodivergent kids, is we become the experts and we educate everyone, which is a lot. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I want to ask you around one message for advocacy. Like, if you had one message for policymakers, associations, NGO, governments on this topic, what would it be?
I think the myth, I should say, of thinking that spoken language, is above other modes of communication, including myself. I made this mistake. I didn't want him to have a talker initially. I was thinking, oh, this is going to delay speech. So making that more accessible in schools, and I know things are getting better, and there's more devices out there, and there's free apps and things like that. But there are some states in this country that are really behind with that. So I think the accessible communication, because it can be so frustrating for those individuals when they have the language, inside, and they cannot get it out. And we're expecting only the speech, like they have apraxia, and that's just so frustrating for them. So providing alternative modes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's really powerful and really needed. So I just have one last question before we close, which I always love to ask the guests a quick question about themselves. So what is your go-to comfort item or activity for you to recharge after doing so much advocacy, so much support, so much education? What is your go-to?
There's quite a few things, but I would say probably if I could do two. One would be having my sweet treat in the evening when the kids are or trying to sleep, The other one is when I have time when they're at school, taking a walk, short walks. It's very important. Just a short walk, doesn't have to be something long, just something outside. It has to be outside to put, increase my heart rate and just kind of. So those would be the two things I would say. Not too much, but they get me through the day.
I love it. Very similar. Like for me, the the little chocolate in the evening, with a cup of warm beverage, and then a walk when I can with my puppy is really something that I love as well.
Yes,
thank you.
You have a puppy. We're thinking about that, getting a pet, because I know it helps, but
it really helps.
Yes. Yeah.
We got him during COVID, and he was encouraged by our child psychologist to help with the anxiety and companionship and social isolation. We can talk about it on another time, but this is really something that really helped, and the connection. Like last night, he was in her bed, and really patting him and talking to him, really, really soothing. It's beautiful to watch their connection. So before I let you go, I just want to give the opportunity for anyone who listens to this podcast and is like, okay, how can I connect with Mariam? What is the best way? How can people find out about you, can read your book, can connect with you? What's the best way for that?
The two best ways would be either through Instagram, which is my handle, Mariam Shapera Tales. And then the other way is my website, which is the same thing. It's like www.mariamshaperatales.com. And then, my second book was more of an autism book. My first one's also inspired by him. And my second one was kind of more highlighting his strengths and neurodiversity. That's just basic, whatever, Amazon and all those online places.
Yeah, amazing. We'll put all of the link in the show notes for everyone to be able to connect. Thank you so much, Mariam, for taking the time to share about Gestalt language and your own experience with Joe. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your time.
So quick pulse check with Zoe now. Zoe, do you ever like saying certain phrases over and over?
Yes, it is something I do very often.
Thank you, Zoe, for sharing. And how does it feel when that happens in your head?
It was kind of annoying because you just keep repeating it over and over again and you can't stop.
Thank you for sharing, Zoe, and joining us for this quick pulse check.
That's a wrap for Neurodivergent Pulse. If this helped, follow the show and leave us a quick review on your favorite platform. You can even share this episode with someone who needs it. You can learn more about our platform at understandingzoe.com. Thanks for listening.